Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
There's a long drive way back in center field. Way back it is. Oh, my Willie Mays just brought this crowd to its feet with a catch, which must have been an optical illusion to remember that guy. The show where we monitor memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James, and I sure am glad that I never used the catch for an intro before.
Impeccable timing. Honestly, if you would have, then I probably would have blamed us for the unfortunate news about Willie Mays. So it's fitting that it is now in tribute and in honor of the Say Hey Kid, Diaz saying hey once again. And we had a very special guest, but due to the very expensive nature of getting him in via satellite from the other side of the world, we do not have our very special guest Xavier with us.
I thought for a split second you were going to say we had a very special guest. It was Willie Mays. Whoops.
No. That would have
cursed.
You imagine you get the email from Willie Mays' agent, like, yeah, sure, Willie's got time.
Also, I realized actually I should clarify. I have used quote unquote the catch before, but that was the Niners Vince Scully one, which I used after that NL West legend died. We are doing this the week that Willie Mays died, and I was going to take like a split second to talk about that. Neither of us ever watched Willie Mays play baseball. We weren't of that era, but man, it sure does seem like everyone that saw him play says he was the greatest of all time. And I'm inclined to believe them. One of the best, if not the best, I'd say top two since integration. And frankly, that's real baseball. Specifically of the integration era. One thing I wanted to share. So since that time period, there have been 9 players who have accumulated roughly 70 WAR within a rounding error of exactly 70 WAR. Those 9 players are Alan Trammell, Ron Santo, Barry Larkin, Gary Carter, Scott Rowland, Carlos Beltran, Tim Raines, Manny Ramirez, and Tim Quinn. 7 Hall of Famers. It's 2 guys who would be in the Hall of Fame if not for extenuating circumstances. And the reason I bring them up with that specific amount of WAR, the greatest position player that we have seen in our lifetimes, pure position player, that is Mike Trout, you would need to add 70 WAR to his career total to get to Willie Mays at this point. So take everything that we've seen Mike Trout do, add any one of those 9 Hall of Fame caliber players, they're not all Hall of Famers, and you've got Willie Mays. One last thing about that integration era is it has been crazy in the last couple of years between him and Hank Aaron, also sadly passed, they played in the Negro Leagues, and that is bonkers to think about because they had full major league careers also. And sure, Willie Mays only played 17 games with the Birmingham Black Barons, but it's just another one of those things. It's this history is so much closer than we give it credit for sometimes. And there was just this legend in the background, and that's gone now. And there are very, very few remaining Negro Leaguers. Thank goodness again that they are getting more acknowledgement now. Sucks that so many of them are getting this acknowledgement as they pass. And I don't know if you have anything to add about Mr. Mays.
Well, what struck me when Willie Mays passed is, first of all, it's anytime he gets asked who the greatest player of all time is, he's obviously very magnanimous. The answer that he always gave is Roberto Clemente. And for me, a Puerto Rican who grew up playing baseball, obviously Roberto Clemente is just inherently one of your idols. I wear 21 in every sport whenever it is available because of Roberto Clemente. I think the most iconic picture in baseball that's a non-action shot that is just 3 guys.
Okay.
It's Willie Mays, it's Hank Aaron, and it's Roberto Clemente at one of the All-Star games. And just this picture of just the 3 of them just shooting the shit.
Yeah,
I have seen it reproduced on so much memorabilia. I see it all over the place. And it really puts in context that Clemente died 20 years before I was born, basically at the end of his career. And that helps to put in perspective that we had these three legends that all played at the same time, all very important for their own reasons. In a way, like, we are very fortunate that we had Hank and we had Willie around to continue to be these, like, wealths of wisdom of the game as well.
Yeah.
Like, there's been so many Willie Mays old interviews that have been popping up of just him talking about, like, who was the best pitcher you went against, or what was it like dealing with racism at the time? Like, what was the craziest story? What was the funniest thing that happened in the clubhouse?
Well, and beyond, like, wisdom for us and, like, baseball writ large, it's been great seeing how many players had, like, personal connection to him. Like, yeah, he's Barry Bonds' godfather. Like, the other potential best pure position player since integration was mentored by Willie Mays, essentially. But Ken Griffey Jr., was talking about how the Say Hey Kid unsurprisingly influenced the kid. There's something that I've always loved about athletes who recognize how important they are to other athletes.
Exactly, right. Like, it's how important they are to other athletes, how important they are to fans as well. Like, as we look at, this is a crazy comparison to make, but Caitlin Clark is, like, starting to break down boundaries in women's basketball.
Sure.
And the same kind of things that we see with Hank Aaron and Willie Mays at the time being what's the word I'm looking for? A liaison to the next generation.
A bridge,
exactly. And you see, like, Caitlin Clark's doing that with the next generation of girls coming up playing basketball. After every game, you see, like, a line that's like 300 people long trying to get her autograph, and, like, she does every single one of them. And to your point, like, that's what almost makes the athletes the most relatable to us, because that's how we like to think we would be if we got that position.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost the least relatable thing, because we will never have a line of 300 people asking for our autograph. But just like I think you're absolutely spot on. We want to believe we would sign every fucking kid's little thing.
Exactly, and that's the standard that they uphold. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other people that know a lot more about baseball that have said a lot better things than I would be capable to say about Willie Mays, but an absolute titan of the game. And I think it is a blessing that he was with us as long as he was. We were able to see him pass on as much of his knowledge as he was able to the next generation. And I did go to the Phillies game yesterday, and it was nice that, that they gave him the moment of silence before the game. Always tragic, but it's good to reminisce and remember on somebody who's definitely too good to guy.
Remembering a kid.
Exactly. Remember the kid. Yeah.
I would love to, real quick, chase this downer of a baseball story with a bit of an upper of a baseball story, which is I did get to enjoy maybe the purest form of baseball this week at a minor league baseball game. Went to Wilmington on one of those big old bike rides I love to do. Met up with friend of the show, current guy Leonard Brooks. And God, I just love minor league baseball. I love the food contraptions. I got a Scrapple Burger slider order. It was just sliders with Scrapple on them. But, like, I had to have it. I had to know what we were working with there. I love...
Real quick, what's the review?
7 out of 10. It delivers exactly what it promises. It is a small piece of Scrapple on a slider. $9, totally reasonable value. It was not a bad choice whatsoever. I love anytime we go to these away games, because we've done this now. This has become kind of an annual tradition going to these Wilmington ones. And it's great to see, like, all the traveling fans, because there's not necessarily Aberdeen fans there with us watching the Ironbirds. It's Orioles fans going there. And it's always just wild to see that, like, they find these minor league stadiums to converge at. On that note of, like, major league fans watching it, it's always crazy that all these Phillies fans are showing up in Phillies gear to this Wilmington game. Like, yeah, sure, of course, it makes sense that fits in. Then you think about the fact that this is a Nationals affiliate, and, like, Phillies fans may actively hate these players in a matter of just a couple of years. But even more than that, like, I love the people that just go fucking all out in their Blue Rocks gear. Like, the die-hard fans from Wilmington. Bustling metropolis of, hey, Diaz, how many people do you think live in Wilmington? Biggest city in Delaware. This is something that blew Brooks and I's mind. How many people do you think live there?
300,000.
300,000, sure. Like, I was going a little lower, but I was figuring minimum 6 digits. Like, we're talking maybe $150. 71,000 people. Wilmington is a city of 71,000 people. We were baffled by that.
The city of Wilmington has the same population as Lincoln Financial Field.
You can fit all of Wilmington at an Eagles game. That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Unreal. That's insane.
Yeah. But you know what? Let's go a little further north on 95 or anything else that's making memories for you right now.
No, I guess, to move on from that, and I mentioned I was at the Phillies game yesterday, and I've had a little bit of time off recently where I've actually been able to go to games again for the first time in a little bit. It's like the big three I've been to in about the past week. First of all, James, we did get to go to the first 10 innings of a classic.
I guess like we bailed.
The middle like 7.5 actually, I would say, because we were
it's true, yeah. We were en route during the Schwar bomb.
Right, walking through the Baltimore streets. But that game that we went to, we did have to bail on the rain delay. A younger me and I would also, like a single me, would have stayed at that game. But
for sure. A me that wasn't employed the next morning would have stayed through the next game.
Right. But, that game was a joy to go to. I would say the fan behavior in our section, as we talked about,
it was solid. It was absolutely solid.
It was like a BB plus. There's always going to be the bad apple, but they didn't spoil the bunch in this case.
I think that's an apt way of putting your people. Yes.
Yeah. There are some bad apples, but I'd like to think, because I think we as a fan base are so sensitive to the idea that we're assholes. I think we also root out the assholes among us. I think you will step up when a line is crossed. I do think you will also egg people on towards that line, is the thing. Of course.
Like, you'll stop them the second they do it, but you've been goading them into doing it all night.
Oh, he's actually going to throw his beard now. Hey, calm down, buddy. It's okay. But yeah, between that game, we went to see the Water Dogs, Philadelphia Water Dogs,
nice.
PLL, and for their first home game in franchise history, I gotta say, equalizing with 0.8 left in regulation and losing 6 seconds into overtime, that's about as
Philadelphia, baby!
It felt so much like home. Like, I couldn't... Also, it's hard for me to, get actually angry about a team that's only existed for so short, and,
sure.
It's a family atmosphere at the game, but I literally just started busting out laughing when Boston won it in overtime. What other reaction can there be? Of course. And they played another home game the next day against, I believe, your Maryland, whatever.
The Whip Snakes?
The Whip Snakes. And I got to tell you, James, because I know you were following it, but the listeners need to know. The Whip Snakes then beat my Water Dogs in overtime.
Yeah.
For the second day in a row.
Shout out to Whip Snakes this season. I got Sundays off coming up soon.
It is enjoyable. And the one thing I'll say, I went into it with a goal. I was like, I'm going to straddle the line. This is obviously a fun endeavor. It's not too intense, but I want to start a chant. I just want to start one. This is the first home game. If I can start something that becomes part of the lore of the franchise. So it was nobody at first, but a very simple, after every goal, they get back in the face-off circle to the tune of JETS. DOGS.
Dogs. I love it.
And then you start barking after you hit the third dogs.
I don't think you mentioned that part.
I left that out. And it's no wonder the first couple times I did it alone, people are kind of looking at me like, what the hell is this guy's problem?
You just got to commit, though. It's just like Josie was saying. The joke gets better.
Exactly. You need to commit to it. And that's where I think other lesser fans would have faltered. I did not falter. I remained committed to the bit. First of all, obviously, my sister and Jocelyn both gave me pity chanting alongs. But then there's a team of 11U lacrosse players sitting in front. They start getting into it. There's the dad over my shoulder who's like, hey, if I'm here, I might as well have fun with this. And James, when they equalized the force overtime, I tell you, the entire side of the stadium was doing the chant. And I went back. You could hear it on TV, pretty loud and clear.
Hey, what's up, Philadelphia Water Dogs super fan Justin Diaz?
I the official like rooting section was in front of me, and look, they did as best as they could. They were trying to start any chance the whole time, and if they steal that and they want to say that they came up with that eventually, that's fine. I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it
But
for
listener,
the water
this
dogs.
is being recorded on June 20th, so for copyright reasons, if they do it after that, it's June 20th, 5:36 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Look, and I don't even want copyright. I just want acknowledgement. Like, I want in the program, when they're talking about the history of the team, the DOGS chant, which was started by Justin Diaz at the first home game in team history. That's all I need. I don't need anything else. I just need that one first clause of the sentence. I don't even need the whole sentence. I just need a clause within the sentence. That's all I'm asking for. I then also went yesterday, so on Juneteenth, the Phillies had a matinee game against the Padres, and I was wondering why we were able to get such good seats for like not as expensive. And then I remembered, oh God, the East Coast is in a horrific heat wave. When you
don't look burnt. I'm impressed.
Bucket hat, pants, covered the short sleeve shirt, brought in sunscreen, reapplied every 30 seconds because I kept sweating it off. I literally did not sweat as much running my marathon as I did just simply sitting there watching that game. But there were some Padres fans that were in the section as well. And, similar to when we were the visiting fans going down to Baltimore, just a good experience getting in with the community. And I guess the reason why I bring all this up is I've been working a lot of sports over the past 4 to 6 months. It's been very much my busy season, basically since college basketball started. And it's not that you lose touch with the root of it. But at a certain point, it does become mechanical. Like, okay, write up the graphics, click the button to put the graphic in. And there's sometimes you don't even really get to watch the game because you're just so focused on what your specific job is. To be able to have this return to what originally draws you to the sport, right? Watching it on TV, playing it yourself, or just simply sitting in the stands, building community with these people around you that you've never met before and you're never going to see again. But, for these 3 hours, you are my friend or you are my enemy, but we're all here doing this thing together. There's just something beautiful about it. And it's been very nice to be able to return to, or like reject modernity, return to the roots type thing.
Absolutely. Return with a V. We're reigniting your passion.
Exactly. And not that it ever did, but to just remind you what it was like when you were young, as the Killers used to say. But
still do. They're touring this year.
That's very true. That's very true. They're still active. But it's just been really nice taking in some games. And I know like there's some people I work with, aka Canner's probably listening to this, like, Diaz, you maniac, when I don't have to work sports, why would I watch more sports? But I just can't get enough.
Because it's sports.
I can't get enough. Inject it directly into my veins.
Well, if Diaz, you can't get enough, I've got some good news for you. Since we don't have Xavier with us today, I thought I would show you a little something I've been working on here at the Hall. We've had this one gallery under renovation for a little bit. I've kind of had it roped off because there was a category that you brought up early last season
Well, no, along those lines, I was going to say, did you see tonight is Cole Hamels' Wall of Fame night for the Phillies? David Dahl has been wearing 35 all year. And as of like this morning
is now 31. Which is like, why would you give him 35 if you knew this was coming? Which also makes me think, did you not plan this, Phillies?
It's either they didn't plan it or they planned it from the very beginning where they're like, we're going to make David Dahl look like such a good guy when he does this.
Okay. So this is we're wingmanning David Dahl.
Exactly. Because, what did I just say? Wow, what a nice gesture by David Dahl. And now, along the lines of what I think you're about to get into a little bit, he may very well be the second to last Philly to ever wear 35. Because Cole Hamels will wear it tonight.
Sure. True. That is a thread, so to speak, that I was interested in talking about these jerseys. Talking specifically about sweaters, because the reason that I didn't bring this up when you discussed that topic was because I try to not repeat sports back to back. I just talked about a hockey player, and Also, I didn't think there was necessarily enough on any of the guys that I'm going to discuss in a second to really build out like a full presentation. But I wanted to build this little special exhibition that we've had here to discuss it, because I do think that there's a kernel at the core of this that like really kind of gets at, I think, the overall ethos of the show, and I want to discuss that with you a little bit. So please, if you will, follow me into this wing. Like I said, we're going to discuss some guys, but as you can tell from this first swing, maybe we should say that we're talking about some geese, because here we have, dear listener, the entry wall to this, and it is a large homage to the 1934 and 1935 Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens, at this point, they're 4-time champions, and they have a pretty mid-year this season in 34-35. They finished 19, 23, and 6. It's going to be good for third in the division. They will get a playoff berth, and then they'll get dispatched quickly in the first round by the New York Rangers. But during that season, there's going to be 3 of these geese that will start a trend that I think is worth looking at. Here at the wall, we have our first instance of this that we found. It's a clipping from the November 17th, 1934 edition of the Montreal Gazette. This hails the local debut of 3 new players for the Habs this day: Nelson Crutchfield, Jack McGill, and my temporary focus here for a moment, Joe Lamb. Joe Lamb had debuted a week prior with the club in Toronto, but he's making his home debut versus Detroit. And so the 3 of them are all kind of mentioned in this article. Joe Lamb is a Montreal legend at this point in many ways, because he's already played for the Montreal Royal Bank, a junior team. They've already played for the Montreal Young Royals, also a junior team. He's also played for the Montreal Victorias, another junior team. And he has played for the city's other NHL team, the English-speaking Montreal Maroons. But now we've gone from Montreal to Montreal. He is with the Francophone side, the Canadiens. With these Francophones, right-winger Lamb plays 7 games, pretty ho-hum, gets 5 points in total. 4 of those are from 1 game, where he has 2 goals and 2 assists against the Rangers. Maybe it's capitalizing on this moment. The Canadiens, the next day, according to Hockey Reference, ship him out. Joe Lamb is traded from Montreal to the St. Louis Eagles. Go Birds. And among the pieces sent back is our second temporary focus here. You can see a picture of this gentleman, another right winger, Des Roche. He had also grown up in Montreal, spent some time there as a child, but he and his brother Earl, while they'd been amateurs there and won the Allen Cup there, which is a kind of Canadian FA Cup, he had been out of Montreal for a little bit. He had been over in Ottawa just after Joe Lamb actually left Ottawa. They do not cross paths here, but they do have this unifying thread. And he will be briefly reunited with his brother Earl in Ottawa. They play together. Roche actually scores the last goal in Ottawa before the team moves to St. Louis, and then he is traded to the Montreal Canadiens. Des, with the Habs, he spends even fewer games with the Habs than Lamb does this year. Only 5 for an 11-day stretch in December before he is sent to Buffalo, just like his brother had been sent by the Eagles. So once again, he reunites with Earl after being traded by Montreal. They get some cash back. Those guys go up also later on to Detroit, the exception of like 8 total games. Like they played their entire career joined at the hip. I think that's delightful. But sticking with the Habs, after that trade, there's a third Hab that is notable in this season for a specific reason. Lamb and Roche had both been right wingers, and they do have another teammate, sort of, that they share something with this year. He overlaps for a single game with Joe Lamb on December 1st, doesn't play again with the team for a while, and then comes back up after Roche has left. He appears in the fewest games of the trio, only 4. This guy's name is Leo Bourgeot. So altogether, we've got fewer than 20 games played from these 3 guys, Joe Lamb, Des Roche, and Leo Bourgeot, who is a defender, for the record. He is not a right winger like the other 2. But these 3 guys, they play a very, very minor role in Montreal for this 1 year that, like I said, ends up mattering not at all. They lose to the Rangers. The 3 of them have like some interesting footnotes in the rest of the career. We actually here have the records of a trade that Hockey Reference has. Joe Lamb, he goes back to Montreal to be a Maroon later on. And then, near as I can tell, based on records, in 1938, he is traded from New York to Detroit for a player to be named later. The player named later is Joe Lamb, who was traded back for himself.
That is delightful. I've heard about that with a baseball trade before, where the player to be named later ended up being the player named originally.
Editor's note. because, listener, I couldn't just leave it like that. Here are the 4 MLB players in history to have ever been traded for themselves. We're going to go in reverse chronological order. The most recent is John McDonald. He is also the only one in the majors for all 3 of these steps, or to be the purest form of this. He's on the Jays in 2005, when he is traded to Detroit on July 22nd for future considerations, finishes the season with them, and then returns to the Jays roster November 10th, plays with them the next year. The 4 guys I'm going to mention here, they have 5.6 combined WAR. John McDonald has 6.3 of that, and that is not a typo. Dickie Knowles, he is a member of the 1980s Phillies World Series team. In 1987, he was on the Cubs before being traded to Detroit September 21st for a player to be named later, and 32 days later, they still hadn't agreed on what player, so in order to finish out the transaction, they just agreed to send him back as a do-over. Also notable for Dickie Knowles, his ex-wife Susan Knowles was on The Golden Bachelor in 2023. The next one, Brad Golden. In 1980, the Yankees traded him in the offseason on November 18th to Seattle for money and a player to be named later. May of 81 is when Seattle then sends him back, but the Yankees also traded him in April of 1982 to the Expos and got him sold back that offseason. Finally, we have the very first instance of this, the very first member of this fraternity, Harry Cheedy, who got traded a lot in his career. He had just been traded twice in the calendar year 1961, first from Detroit to Baltimore, and then the offseason from Baltimore to Cleveland, where he's all set to start the 1962 season. But before he ever plays a game for the Cleveland Baseball Club, he is acquired by the expansion New York Mets in April of 1962. Plays 15 games for the Mets, and he is then returned to Cleveland. That is unfortunately, though, the end of his MLB career. Never makes it to the majors again. Passes away in 2002 at the ripe old age of 69. So before we return to the show, I do hope you will join me for a quick, appropriately somber, nice. For the record, Leo Borchel, he's the only one of these 3 to ever win a cup. He does so a couple years prior with the New York Rangers. They keep coming up in this for whatever reason. He eventually finished his career with the Springfield Indigenous Peoples. Years before Joe Lamb will do the same, and that is notable because that team is now the Abbotsford Canucks, the AHL affiliate of my beloved Vancouver Canucks. So these 3, as I've described, not really that notable, but a common thread that I keep hinting at that links them to a later trio. I'll just check in real quick. Diaz, do you think you know what we're getting at?
Is it 3 retired numbers that they all wore before some legends got to town?
It is related to numbers that they wore that others cannot now. We can definitely say that. Yes, you are on the right track. But we'll continue a little bit with mystery for now because it seems like you haven't quite gotten it yet, and I want to hold some suspense. And we're going to fast forward also 4 decades now for what it's worth. We're going to leave behind our beautiful 1934-1935 Montreal wall, go down here to the 1970s. And that's when the next one of the guys we are concerned with pops up, and that's Rick Dudley. He is the first of this second trio we're going to talk about to debut. He debuts with Buffalo. The state of New York is popping up a lot in this. In 1972, he signs with them as an undrafted free agent. And after a couple years, he actually jumps over to the WHA's Cincinnati Stingers. But he will come back to Buffalo after the WHA gets swallowed up. And he'll finish his NHL career with 30 games in Winnipeg before turning to a life as a coach and GM, sometimes concurrently, in the NHL, AHL, and IHL. 2 years after his debut, we unfortunately turn our eyes to the sporting hellscape of Kansas City. They have the second overall pick from that year debuting for their Kansas City Scouts. This guy's name is Wilfrid Paymont. He's another French-Canadian individual. He is there for the team's last 2 years in Kansas City before they realize that this is cursed sporting land, as we've established, and they make their way to Colorado. Paymont becomes one of the very first captains in Colorado Rockies history. He is also part of the historically uncouth 1977 Canadian World Cup team that just violently beats the shit out of the Soviets. I know you're a big fan of some of the Flyers members of that team.
Bobby Clark broke some dude's fibula in game 2. It turned the whole series around.
Goddamn right. I love that our commentary on that is, and it turned the whole series around.
What a brilliant heady play to deliberately assault a guy in a non-hockey move to win a hockey game.
Very cerebral. After 4 years in Colorado, a pair of trades take him to Toronto for parts of 3 seasons and Quebec for part of 5. He has a pretty long portion altogether here in the NHL. Kicks around a little bit with the Rangers, the Sabres, and eventually he hangs it up as the last player to have ever appeared for the Scouts in the league, for what it's worth. We've got 5 players listed now, Diaz. There is one more that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Before I get to that last one, do we have any other guesses as to what we're getting at now?
I mean, I'm fascinated, but it's a lot like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I have no idea where this ending's going.
So there is a thread that connects them all, and it is a thread that connects them through their hockey sweaters across several different uniforms. This is what's going to link their career. In that November 17th, 1934 article from the Gazette that we had there, Lamb had his number listed. It was being issued for the first time by Montreal. And based on all available information, that's the first time that particular number was ever issued. Roche takes that number after Lamb's traded, and then later after Roche is gone and Bourgeois comes up for his second stint that season, he is granted this number. And so it's been worn for a total of 15 games in this one season by the Montreal Canadiens. No one else in the league wears this number until Rick Dudley comes along in the 1970s. It is theorized that is because he might have just worn a practice jersey one day in a game and then decided to stick with it. So he wears it for 30 games there in Winnipeg. And then save for a portion of Paymon's 187 games with Toronto at most. We don't know the full number. I don't know what splits he had for a couple numbers he wore there. That number, as far as I know, was worn altogether 232 times in NHL history before the 6th player to ever wear this number. And the last player to ever wear this number, 99 himself, Wayne Gretzky.
Incredible.
Now, the number 9 is a very popular number in hockey, thanks to Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe. A lot of these guys like Paymon wore 9 for a while, Dudley wore 9 for a while, Gretzky also wore 9 for a long time in honor of his hero, Gordie Howe. And then he got to a team where, surprise, Gordie Howe was someone else's hero on that team, and 9 was already taken. So he was like, cool, bet, give me a second one. And he went with 99, and that is the jersey that he wore for every single one of his 1,567 Major League games. That is including both his WHA and NHL seasons, since he had those couple there with the Oilers at the beginning. And that is also what he wore for all of his 2,967 points across those 21 years. Edmonton retired this number almost immediately after he retires. And the Kings formally retire it in 2002. But before that, we have the scene here from the NHL All-Star Game in 2000, when for just the second time ever in the history of the North American professional sporting leagues, after Major League Baseball did this for Jackie Robinson's 42, this has been done in 97 for Robinson, a number retired league-wide, being done here in 2000 for Gretzky. Again, second ever time that it has been done. We have now since repeated that one more time with Bill Russell in the NBA. But the reason that I bring up the accomplishments of one Mr. Gretzky, it isn't to praise him. He is certainly praiseworthy, obviously. But when I found out about the fact that there were only 5 other 99s in NHL history, looking into who had worn it before it got retired league-wide for everyone, I found it a bit tragic that these somewhat sillier stories that I have admittedly rushed through a bit, but these sillier stories that we can see here in this exhibit, that they get understandably overshadowed. It's not a typical number. It wasn't in hockey then. It's not really in any sport except for kind of football, and I guess a few more people are taking it in baseball now with guys like Aaron Judge, but this is a number that was normally reserved for, I don't know how to put it nicer, fucking weirdos. And there's a part of me that laments that there's never going to be some weird goober in the future that joins this eclectic fraternity of the other 5 guys that wore 99. Forever now, 99 will just mean Wayne Gretzky, and it won't mean these 5. As you were saying a moment ago at the end of your Making Memories, sports is fundamentally the thing that we seek from it is connections. We want to have connections between fans and teams. We want to have connections between players and cities. We want to have connections between different generations of players and of families. And with all of those connections, this is what brought me to, I think, is a kind of articulation of our ethos here. Stars are good. Stars are objectively good for the sport. Someone like Caitlin Clark is objectively good. Shohei Ohtani is objectively good. Stars are going to bring people in. They are going to be people you remember. They're going to be people who make fans. But it feels a lot of the time like our relationships with stars, we all might have slight personal differences, but there is a certain uniformity in the average sports fan's relationship with a star. And I think that that is in contrast to the fact that there really isn't a lot of uniformity in our individual fandom. Every person's fandom is their own. Even if you root for all the same sports as someone, you Diaz, you feel differently about Scott Rowland than I'm sure some Phillies fans do. I know that that is a split decision at the very best for Mr. Rowland. But like, there are people who root for teams that you root for that have completely different feelings about every single player. I love Nolan Reimold. I fucking love Nolan Reimold. Nolan Reimold is probably more important to my Orioles fandom than Manny Machado, Cal Ripken, Miguel Tejada, insert star here that isn't one of the ones currently giving me some modicum of hope. And like, Nolan Reimold probably matters more to them in terms of how I exist with this team. And what I think we've tried to do for the last 120 episodes of this show is show that like those guys that we connect with that are going to be more personal to us, that is what defines the fandom that is unique to each individual fan. And I'm not trying to make the outlandish claim that these 5 guys are more important than Wayne Gretzky. These 5 guys have like roughly a combined 200 games in this jersey. Wayne Gretzky has almost 8 times that. And thousands of times more points than these gentlemen put up in this. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but not that much. Hundreds at the very least is not an exaggeration.
I would be curious if we went through every jersey number in NHL history. Where does points scored by players to wear number 99 rank?
I mean, I feel like, as we've just said here, 9 probably has to be up at the tops because you've got a couple stars like Gordie Howe, but then you just have everyone wants to wear it. That would be interesting to look at. I would be, you know what? If this exhibit does well, if we bring in some good visitation numbers here, I would love to revisit this with the curator in the future. But what I'm hoping comes across this is like, again, these guys are not more important, but they're not important. And maybe there is some old timer in Winnipeg. Maybe there is some like diehard Kansas City hockey fan. Fuck, maybe there's like some 90-something-year-old decrepit guy in Montreal who first got into the Canadiens during that first 30 season. Maybe they all have some kind of formative memory tied to these guys that cemented their fandom, solidified their fandom, made them who they are today, and shaped how they interact with the sports that we all love to watch. That fandom and how we all interact with sports, we've said a couple times this season in talking to people much, much smarter and more eloquent than us, that is what we are ultimately concerned with here. And so, again, not to denigrate the great Mr. Gretzky, but I have really enjoyed, in a clandestine fashion, putting together this exhibit on the other 5 99s in the history of the NHL. And while we're not necessarily going to induct the 5 of them, I am proud to say that we have acquired a jersey from each, a game-worn jersey from all of these guys. Got to tell you, those 34, 35 Montreal Canadian ones, I'm very thankful for the Canadian dollar exchange rate currently. But we will be hanging those 5 jerseys in our rafters, at least for a little bit, whereas all the other rafters can keep their Gretzky ones for now. Because these are the kind of guys that we would care to remember here.
Long may they be remembered. Long may they be remembered. And yes, to your point, it is so important that we cherish the non-superstar. And that's really what this whole podcast is about. Everybody remembers Wayne Gretzky. He is the 99 in hockey. But there were other 99s. And I'm glad that we are able to honor them with this exhibit now.
So, folks, we do hope that you will make a trip to the hall, wherever we've established. I think we have said canonically there is a physical location. I don't remember where it is.
I think we established what was the geographic exact center of the continental U.S., and that was where we decided it was. I believe
Right,
that was what we said.
right. I think we're somewhere in Oklahoma in that case. Maybe we're in Indian territory. That'd be cool. For the record, I know that we normally don't like saying those words. That is what it's called by most people that I've ever met from those reservations.
We will defer to the locals when it comes to the terminology they want us to use.
We appreciate you all keeping the local spirit alive by continuing to visit with us, even when it is not a full meaning of the Guy Butyl. This is just some reminiscing that we wanted to share with you all. So if you have enjoyed it at all, I can tell you that there are some people that you owe thanks to in addition to us. And those are producer Craig, the coders behind him, and our musical director, Don Ham, for that lovely theme music. We, though, owe all of our thanks to you all for continuing to join us week in and week out. We are excited for Xavier to be back in the States by the time you're hearing this. Knock on wood, everything went okay with the travels. And we will look forward to bringing you a new batch of guys next week as the Guy Butyl reconvenes. In the meantime, you can always check out everything related to the show at bit.ly/rememberthatguy. All one word, all lowercase. But that's all I've got for now. Diaz, anything else here as we part ways?
Nothing else I can really think of. I am very thankful that we will be getting back to regular business next week once we have Xavier back.
Hell yeah, brother. In that case, let's not keep you guys waiting anymore. Begin the wait. I guess, sorry for next
week. The countdown
week.
Starts now.
Countdown starts right motherfucking now. This will be out in approximately another 7 days. You'll hear the normal shit then. But until then, guys, I have been one of your hosts, James.
And I've been Diaz. While Xavier is not with us, there was a new rule that was just passed. Did you hear about this? It's about you can only have a certain amount of utility infielders. They called it the infield guy rule.
God damn it.
You see that the Bulls just traded Caruso to the Thunder for possible pedophile Josh Giddey.
Dude, fucking why do good players go to teams that don't need them?
I mean, it's a great pickup by the Thunder.
It's a phenomenal pickup.
But it's so annoying because everybody's like, oh, Sam Presti, genius. And I'm like, this is literally what the Sixers would have been doing 6 years ago if Hinkie never got fired. We would be doing these exact same things.
I mean, here's the question. Has anyone ever seen Sam Presti and Sam Hinkie in the same room? Probably.
They are
because
both
I think
Sams.
they did.
Yeah, I feel like they probably
but
did.
Unless.
I haven't seen either of them in the same room.
Exactly.
I haven't seen either of them anywhere.
What would you do if you saw Sam Hinkie?
Well, the thing is, I think he would be hard to recognize at this point because, he's
sure.
First of all, he's surprisingly ripped, squats 500. So I feel like my mind's eye would be looking for somebody much meeker. So I don't think I'd recognize him. And he also has shaved his head and has a full beard now, a pretty nice beard at last sight. But last sight was 3 years ago, so I have no clue what he looks like now. He could be a mustache guy.